asemenea să adresez mulțumiri inițiatorilor și organizatorilor acestei mari manifestări populare din București, considerând aceasta ca o
On December 21st, 1989, Nicolae Ceaușescu stepped onto a balcony in Bucharest to address his people. He had done this many times before. The crowds were always organized, the applause was always scripted, the cheers were always on cue. But this time, something happened that had never happened in 24 years of his rule. The crowd booed. You can watch the footage. It was broadcast live on state television. The dictator freezes mid-sentence. His hand goes up, confused. His mouth opens, but no words come out. For 8 terrifying seconds, Nicolae Ceaușescu, the man who ruled Romania with absolute power, the man whose secret police had informants in every apartment building, stands paralyzed as thousands of people shout him down. His wife Elena grabs the microphone. "Be quiet! Be quiet!" she screams. It was too late. In 4 days, both of them would be dead, shot by their own soldiers in a military courtyard on Christmas morning. Their execution would be filmed. Their bodies would be shown on television, and Romania would become the only Eastern Bloc country to violently overthrow its communist government. This is the story of Nicolae Ceaușescu, how a shoemaker's son built one of the most repressive regimes in Europe, and how it all collapsed in 72 hours. Nicolae Ceaușescu was born on February 8, 1918, in a small village called Scornicești. His father was reportedly an alcoholic who beat his children. At age 11, Nicolae ran away to Bucharest. He found work as a shoemaker's apprentice, and he found communism. His employer, Alexandru Sandulescu, was a committed communist who introduced the young Nicolae to underground party meetings. By his teens, Ceaușescu was a full-time revolutionary, arrested multiple times for distributing communist literature and organizing strikes. Prison made him a true believer. He spent much of the 1930s and 1940s behind bars, where he met other party leaders and built the connections that would later carry him to power. When the Soviet Union installed a communist government in Romania after World War II, Ceaușescu was positioned perfectly to rise. He climbed through the ranks under Romania's Stalinist leader, Gheorghiu Dej. When Gheorghiu Dej died in 1965, Ceaușescu took his place as General Secretary of the Communist Party. He was 47 years old. At first, he seemed different from other Eastern Bloc leaders. He eased censorship. He criticized the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia in 1968, publicly denouncing Moscow while other communist states applauded. Western leaders loved him. He was the good communist, independent, reform-minded, someone the West could work with. Queen Elizabeth II made him a Knight Grand Cross of the Order of the Bath. The Queen of Denmark inducted him into the Order of the Elephant. Richard Nixon visited Bucharest in 1969, the first U.S. president to visit a communist country during the Cold War. But the liberalization didn't last. By the mid-1970s, Ceaușescu had transformed Romania into something far darker than the Soviet satellites he once criticized. He built a cult of personality that would have made Stalin blush. State media called him the genius of the Carpathians and the Danube of thought. Portraits of Nicolae and his wife Elena hung in every school, every factory, every government office. His birthday was a national celebration. His speeches were broadcast for hours. Elena was part of the problem. She presented herself as a world-renowned scientist, a chemist with multiple honorary doctorates. In reality, she had never graduated from high school. Her scientific papers were written by others, but she controlled Romania's Academy of Sciences and demanded to be addressed as comrade, academician, doctor, engineer. Together, they ruled as a family dynasty. Their son, Nicu, was being groomed as heir apparent. Their daughter, Zoya, became a mathematician. Their other son, Valentin, stayed out of politics, but still enjoyed the privileges of the regime. And behind the personality cult was the Securitate, one of the most feared secret police forces in the world. The Securitate had informants everywhere. 1 in 4 Romanians was reportedly feeding information to the state. Neighbors spied on neighbors. Children were encouraged to report on parents. Every telephone was assumed to be tapped. Every apartment building had a watcher. Dissent was crushed with surgical precision. Critics disappeared. Labor organizers died of suspicious accidents. Miners who went on strike in 1977 later developed unusual rates of cancer. Rumors spread that the Securitate had given them prolonged X-ray exposure to ensure their slow deaths. Romania became a prison of 23 million people. Then came the 1980s and the austerity. Ceaușescu had borrowed heavily from the West in the 1970s to fund industrial projects. By 1981, Romania owed approximately $10 billion to foreign creditors. Rather than negotiate or default, Ceaușescu decided to pay it all back, immediately and in full. The result was catastrophic for ordinary Romanians. Food was rationed, bread could only be purchased from one's registered location. Sugar and cooking oil were strictly controlled. Meat became a luxury most families rarely saw. People waited in lines for hours to buy basic necessities. Electricity was cut to 2 hours a day in winter. Romanians shivered in unheated apartments while state television, broadcast for just a few hours each evening, showed images of Ceaușescu touring factories and receiving foreign dignitaries. Hot water was available only on certain days. Gasoline was restricted. Light bulbs were limited to 40 watts. One doctor recalled operating by flashlight when the power cut out mid-surgery. Meanwhile, Ceaușescu was building the Palace of the Parliament, the second largest administrative building in the world after the Pentagon. It cost an estimated $1.75 billion. To construct it, he demolished a fifth of central Bucharest, including historic churches and thousands of homes. By 1989, Romania had paid off its foreign debt. Ceaușescu announced this achievement with great fanfare. But the suffering continued. The austerity had become ideology. The dictator seemed to believe that hardship was good for the Romanian character. The final indignity was Decree 770. Ceaușescu wanted a larger population, more workers, more soldiers, more Romanians. In 1966, he banned abortion and contraception for women under 40 with fewer than 4 children. The state declared that the fetus is the socialist property of the whole society. Police conducted mandatory gynecological exams on women of childbearing age. Those who became pregnant were monitored to ensure they didn't terminate. Illegal abortions still happened, but under horrific conditions that killed thousands of women. The birth rate surged initially, then crashed as women found ways around the law. What remained were thousands of unwanted children, abandoned to state orphanages where conditions were medieval. After the revolution, the world would discover these institutions. Children tied to beds, malnourished, rocking back and forth in empty rooms. By 1989, Romania was the last hardline communist state in Eastern Europe. Poland had held free elections. Hungary had opened its borders. The Berlin Wall was about to fall. Even the Soviet Union was liberalizing under Gorbachev. Ceaușescu watched it all with contempt. At the Party Congress in November 1989, he was re-elected for another 5-year term. He denounced the changes sweeping through Eastern Europe as Western plots. He believed Romania was different. He believed his people loved him. He was wrong. The revolution began in a small city in western Romania called Timișoara. Laszlo Tokes was a Hungarian Reformed pastor who had been criticizing the regime on Hungarian television. Broadcasts that Romanians in the border region could receive. The government ordered him evicted from his church housing. On December 15, 1989, his congregation surrounded his apartment to prevent the eviction. Romanian neighbors joined them. By December 16th, the protest had grown into the thousands and spread to the city center. Ceaușescu ordered the army and Securitate to restore order. On December 17th, security forces opened fire on demonstrators. The exact death toll remains disputed. Estimates range from several dozen to several hundred killed that weekend. Ceaușescu flew to Iran for a scheduled state visit. While he was negotiating trade deals in Tehran, Timișoara was burning. He returned on December 20th and addressed the nation on television, calling the protesters fascists and foreign agents. He convened a rally in Bucharest for the next day. It would be his last. December 21st, 1989. The crowds gathered in front of the Central Committee building as they had done countless times before. Workers were bussed in from factories. Students were marched over from universities. Everyone knew the routine. Ceaușescu stepped onto the balcony. He began his speech, promising higher wages, higher pensions, more benefits, standard fare. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, people started shouting. Some say it began with students. Others say it was workers from a nearby factory. The shouts became a roar. The roar became chaos. Watch the footage. Watch Ceaușescu's face. For 24 years, he had controlled everything. Every word printed, every image broadcast, every whisper in every apartment. And now, live on state television, his people were telling him exactly what they thought of him. The broadcast cut to a test pattern. But it was too late. Millions of Romanians had seen it. The spell was broken. That night, protests erupted across Bucharest. Security forces fired on crowds. Tanks rolled through the streets. The next morning, December 22nd, the army switched sides. Defense Minister Vasile Milea was found dead, officially ruled a suicide, though many doubted it. By noon, the protesters had stormed the Central Committee building. Nicolae and Elena Ceaușescu fled by helicopter from the rooftop just minutes before the mob reached them. The pilot claimed he was receiving anti-aircraft fire and landed near the town of Târgoviște. The Ceaușescus commandeered passing cars, hiding in fields and a forest as their regime collapsed around them. That evening, they were captured by local soldiers and taken to a military garrison. The new authorities, a hastily formed National Salvation Front, debated what to do with them. Some wanted a proper trial. Others feared that Securitate loyalists would attempt a rescue. The decision was made, a quick military tribunal, then execution. On Christmas morning, December 25, 1989, Nicolae and Elena Ceaușescu were brought to a small room in the Târgoviște garrison. A 10-member military tribunal charged them with genocide, economic sabotage, and attempting to flee the country with billions in foreign bank accounts. The trial lasted less than 2 hours. It was, by any standard, a kangaroo court. The Ceaușescus were not allowed proper defense. Nicolae refused to recognize the tribunal's authority, insisting he was still the legal president of Romania. Elena was defiant to the end. When asked about the Swiss bank accounts, she snapped, "We never had accounts in foreign banks. How could you say that?" When the guilty verdict came, she shouted at the judges. The sentence was death by firing squad, to be carried out immediately. Soldiers tied their hands behind their backs. The Ceaușescus demanded to die together. The soldiers agreed. They were led into a small courtyard. A squad of 3 paratroopers was selected from 20 volunteers. They were joined by 5 other soldiers. The firing squad formed up. Nicolae began singing the Internationale, the communist anthem. The order was given. The shots were fired. Nicolae Ceaușescu was 71 years old. Elena was 73. They died on Christmas Day, 1989, the last people executed in Romania before capital punishment was abolished. The bodies were filmed and the footage broadcast on Romanian television that evening. The country needed to see proof that the nightmare was truly over. In the days after the execution, the killing continued. Gunfire erupted across Bucharest as armed groups, some Securitate, some simply confused soldiers, fired at each other and at civilians. By the time the shooting stopped, over 1,100 people were dead and thousands more wounded. The revolution that overthrew Ceaușescu became the bloodiest uprising of 1989. What happened to the children of the dictator? Nicolae Ceaușescu, the youngest son and intended heir, was arrested on December 22nd. He was shown on television as a prisoner, looking dazed and broken. He was later convicted of instigation to genocide and sentenced to 20 years in prison. He served only a few years before, being released for health reasons. A lifelong alcoholic, Nicolae died of cirrhosis in 1996 at age 45. Zoia Ceaușescu, the daughter, was briefly detained after the revolution. She spent years fighting to rehabilitate her parents' memory, insisting they had been murdered without a fair trial. She died in 2006 at age 57, largely estranged from Romanian society. Valentin Ceaușescu, the eldest son, was the only one who stayed out of politics. He worked as a nuclear physicist and was briefly arrested after the revolution, but never charged. Today, at 78, he still lives in Bucharest, rarely giving interviews. He once said the revolutionaries should have simply killed his parents when they captured them, rather than staging a mockery of a trial. The National Salvation Front, led by Ion Iliescu, took power and dominated Romanian politics for years. Critics noted that many of its leaders were former Communist Party officials. True democracy came slowly to Romania. In 2010, Nicolae and Elena, Ceaușescu's bodies were exhumed for DNA testing to confirm their identities. There had been conspiracy theories that they had somehow survived. The tests confirmed. The bodies in the unmarked graves were indeed the former dictator and his wife. They were reburied with markers. Today, their graves are visited by a small but devoted group of supporters, mainly elderly pensioners who remember the stability of the communist era, if not its brutality. Each year on January 26th, Nicolae's birthday, flowers appear on the grave. The palace of the parliament still stands in Bucharest, a monument to Ceaușescu's megalomania. It is now the seat of Romania's democratic government, a daily reminder of where the country came from. Romania joined NATO in 2004 and the European Union in 2007. The country that Ceaușescu tried to isolate from the world is now firmly integrated into the West. But the scars remain. The orphanages shocked the world when journalists finally gained access. The Securitate files, when they were finally opened, revealed the depth of surveillance and betrayal. Families discovered that relatives, friends, even spouses had been informing on them for years, and the questions about the revolution itself have never fully been answered. Who fired first in Timișoara? Why did the army switch sides so quickly? Was it a genuine popular uprising, or was it helped along by elements within the regime who wanted Ceaușescu gone? What we know for certain is this. On December 21st, 1989, a dictator stepped onto a balcony expecting applause. He heard something else instead. 4 days later, he and his wife were dead, shot by their own soldiers on Christmas morning. The footage of both events, the speech and the execution, circulated around the world. They became twin symbols of 1989, the year communism fell. The confused face of a tyrant who couldn't understand why his people no longer loved him. And the bodies slumped against a wall. Proof that no one rules forever. If you found this video informative, consider subscribing. We tell stories about the rise and fall of those who held absolute power, and what happens when they lose eye.